The biggest question that buyers in Greater Toronto Area real estate have right now is, have we hit the bottom? We're waiting for the bottom to come so we can buy in at that point in time. We know we're not going to be seeing paper losses in the future. Not my favorite way of approaching real estate, obviously. I'm always of the mindset that buy when it's right for you, and if it's not right for you, then just don't buy. It doesn't matter what the market is doing. It all comes down to your personal situation. I digress, though. Today, we're going to dive into an article that I saw this week, and let's pull it up right now. It's from the CBC. Has Toronto's condo market hit its bottom? So we're going to break this article down. I'm going to walk you through a few of the stats just to show you where prices and transactions are at in the Greater Toronto Area, Toronto specifically right now, and then talk on another big newsworthy item that happened this week. We'll get to that later in the video to try and maybe support that we may be finding a bit of a bottom. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Rob Marsiglio. I'm a real estate agent with Valerie Real Estate out here in Durham region. If you like the content and you want to work with me, there's a link down in the description of this video to book a call directly with me. You can subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything going forward. So let's get all into this right now, starting with the article. So from the CBC, has Toronto's condo market hit its bottom? Condo prices have dropped by 25% since 2022 peak, real estate board says. So let's not get all caught up in this 2022 peak. This was an unrealistic time, right? Rates were near zero just right before the rate hiking cycle started. It was not reality. There was a ton of speculation going on. Prices were super frothy. I think it's maybe a bit of an unfair benchmark to compare to. You know, obviously everywhere is going to be down big from that peak. If it wasn't, we'd be in big trouble. So let's totally forget about that 2022 peak. I'll dive into some more numbers later on as we go. After a year of sluggish sales and canceled products, more than a year of sluggish sales, but 2025 was especially sluggish. The condo market in Canada's largest city is showing signs of recovery. They go into some anecdotal story here about Tyler Florian, who was living with his parents, debating whether or not to buy, and he finally made the plunge. So that's a sign of that buyer getting off the sideline. Maybe prices are making more sense now for some buyers to get into the market, hold on to it for a while, and not really worry about where the market is going. They've seen that we've come down so much. They figure we have to be close, so maybe that buyer psychology is starting to switch just a little bit. Tyler credits things like the first home savings account and the RRSP home buyers plan and lower interest rates as really helping him get into that first property. While buyers may seem to be winning right now in a market that it felt like they've been losing in for some time, sellers are still struggling, and it makes sense, right? We see inventory still up, down from historical levels, but still very elevated. Buyers have a lot more selection, a lot more time on their hands to make choices. We've really lopped off the entire investor pool out of that pool of condo buyers. So it's really many end users that are focusing on condo purchases right now. Sellers have less of a buyer pool to sell to, and it's some that are struggling. Sellers hoping for a rebound. So new data released by TRREB, that was the TRREB Market Watch, suggests the slump in the condo market may be coming to an end. I think this is a little bit over the top of an analysis of this report, but I digress. So last month, 1,054 units were sold in the city, a 14.4% increase year over year. Condo prices, however, continued to shrink. They fell by 6.4% over the same period, averaging just over $665,000. I touched on all this in last week's video, which I'm going to link on the screen right now if you want the full breakdown of what the TRREB Market Watch report for April 2026 looked like. And then they give this graph here, which is the average monthly condo price in Toronto. And starting at January of 2022, before the run up to the peak of March 2022, where prices were $831,000, roughly thereabouts. And it's been a kind of lower peaks and lower troughs as we've gone through the year until we settle here in April at just over that $665,000 number, up from where we were at in January. After a bit of a pullback in March, the average price rebounded just a little bit. But I think looking at it just from this lens, this 2022 to now lens, is doing people a disservice. So let's kind of pull back even more to try and see if we are close to a bottom when it comes to those average prices. And for that, we're going to look at the benchmark price. This goes all the way back to 2005. This is put out by CREA every single month. This is actually all publicly accessible information that if you just type in CREA benchmark price, you can pull and put together charts like this for yourself. But why I feel it's disingenuous to start in 2022. Here's where we were at the beginning of 2022. And you can see all of this work that had been done in the prior 17 years, starting in 2025, where that benchmark price was $206,400. Again, this is for Toronto here, and apartments only, okay, is what we're looking at. So again, we're starting up here and then comparing this decline, the benchmark price down to $556,000. So about the same percentage decline in benchmark price. It's not average price. This kind of lumps in all property types together and tries to come up with a benchmark based on sizes of units, features in those units as well. So anyways, going from 710,000 in January 2022 all the way down to 556,000 in April of 2026. Again, down from that peak of 748,500, which was reached in March of 2022. So again, if we were to look at the chart based on how TRREB presented it in their report, or how the CBC put it in that article, my apologies, we're looking at something that will look a little bit more like this, very similar chart to what we just looked at with those average prices. But again, I think it's important to zoom all the way back, because you can see we had relatively linear growth from January 2005 all the way up to, let's call it January 2016. And that's when the market went a little bit ballistic in terms of those benchmark prices. You know, our benchmark price went from 350,000 thereabouts in January 2016. A year later, it was up at 411. And then 3 months after that, it was up at 485. So things really increased rapidly here. It slowed down slightly, the rate of growth, but again, we saw another big spike from the end of 2020 up to this peak that we saw before falling back off. So what I did, very simplistic, rudimentary way to kind of guess where prices should be if we had followed that linear growth, was I put a line on this chart. And this is what that line looks like. So the black line represents relatively linear growth from January 2005 all the way through January 2016. And you can see that's where this big upswing in the benchmark price started to happen. And we still have not come back down to what would be linear growth. So I know people are going to say, you know, the population's a lot higher right now. We had a ton of completions happen leading through this whole phase, mostly bought up by, or not mostly, but a lot of them bought up by investors, whether that's mom and pop, whether that's bigger investors. It wasn't, the end users were really competing through this big time frame right here. And we still have not seen this benchmark price come down to linear growth. So as of April 2026, we're at $556,000. If we were to follow that linear growth trend, we would expect to see that benchmark price actually just shy of $500,000. Call it $480,000, $490,000 for that benchmark price. So this leads me to believe, especially if you subscribe to the theory that we will see things swing back down below the long-term average before picking back trend and taking off again, that there is still some room for condo prices to correct. And just from looking at these numbers specifically, it doesn't feel like we have hit necessarily a bottom in the Toronto condo market. But while that initial article came out on May 9th, I believe it was, just a few days later, another big announcement was made about Jesta Group, which you may or may not have seen already. But a real estate firm plans to turn $500 million worth of Toronto condo stock into rentals. Bit of a misleading headline, we'll get into that in 2 seconds. But the Montreal-based Jesta Group looking to acquire more than 1,000 condo units. Jesta Group, a family-owned global real estate firm, announced its entry into the Toronto housing market on Tuesday when it acquired a bulk condominium portfolio valued at $30 million located near Toronto Metropolitan University. It aims to spend nearly 17 times that amount to acquire 1,000 unsold condo units over the next year, according to the firm's news release. Now, according to Anthony O'Brien, who's the firm's senior managing director, they've been looking at the market for years, and in our opinion, there's a really significant opportunity right now in Toronto. Now, back to that deceiving headline, because this next line is what kind of gives away the real strategy behind this big purchase. So our strategy is to buy it and rent it. So yes, turn it into rentals. But it's not a long-term rental play. They then plan to resell the units back into the market at a later date. And this is when you're definitely going to know that the Toronto condo market bottom is behind you, because if they are buying into the market prior to hitting the bottom, and who knows, they're buying 1,000 units, they're probably getting some bulk discount. They're benefiting from the new GST and HST rules as well. So their price of purchase may be closer to that long-term trend line that we just talked about, but still, I don't think it's quite there. By the time they start selling, mark my words, we will be back on the way up, and the bottom, I think, will be behind us at that point in time. Now, the reasoning for this is that the anticipated supply of new condos is going to fall off a cliff because no one is building new product today, he said, noting that would drive pricing back up and create a more stable market. So I think this is directly speaking, and then they're buying new construction product right now. But just as we've seen GST and HST rebates on new homes in the suburbs potentially have a knock-on effect on the resale market, I think the same thing will be said when it comes to this big purchase, this strategy, having effects on the resale and rental markets in the city of Toronto. Rental markets maybe right now specifically, and resale markets in the future. To wrap up very quickly, we may have seen a bottom in the Toronto condo market, but it is not from a price perspective, it's from a transaction perspective. So here is the Habistat, my favorite real estate analytics platform, and I have 2026 highlighted. You can see that for 2 straight months now, condo apartments in the city of Toronto have seen year-over-year increases in transaction volume, and that is coming off the back of historically low January, where we saw 594 sales reported, and then in February, where we saw 724 sales reported. We're now up at that 1,033 or so mark, according to the Habistat. So I think that the activity bottom is behind us, but just like everything else we've discussed today, I'm not convinced prices have found their bottom yet. So have we reached the bottom for Toronto's condo market? So the transaction bottom is more than likely in. I still do not think prices are in for everything that we just described. That benchmark linear growth indicator, I think, is something to really keep an eye on as that gap continues to close. I think we'll be getting closer to a market bottom. Seeing a group like Jesta come in and buy up all this inventory is a sign that we are closer to the bottom than we were, but we're not going to know the true bottom, and it will be behind us at that point until they start really selling those units. If you're interested in working with me to kind of talk through all this stuff for your own home search, whether that's condos, where I'll definitely be referring you to somebody in the city, or a place out here in Durham region or York region, there's a Calendly link in the description of this video where you can book a call directly with me to talk real estate, talk shop, whatever that looks like for you. If you enjoyed this video, I ask that you like it and subscribe to the channel so I can reach more people just like you and so that you don't miss anything going forward. I really do appreciate you sticking with me right through to the end of this video. Till we speak again next time, please stay safe and cheers. If you enjoyed this video and want to see some of the work that I've done in previous weeks, I have a video up on screen for you right now. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.